Hey there, this is Katie from the Jane team. I've been coming to The Daily Show now for a few weeks, and I wanted to let you in on a little secret. Jane doesn't have a sales team. Thanks to our amazing community, our growth has been primarily fueled through word-of-mouth referrals. Wild, right? For us here at Jane, we'd rather see you choose Jane because it's helpful, intuitive, and fun to use, than feel pressured into buying something that might not be the best fit. Nobody likes a pushy salesperson, right? If you want to see if Jane is the right fit, consider this your personal invitation to a one-on-one demo with my team. We'll show you around and dive into any features that you might have questions about. Head over to jane.app/physical therapy and you'll find all that you need. You can also mention the PT on Ice Daily Show for a 1-month grace period to get started with Jane. A little gift from us to you.
All right, YouTube, how we doing? All right, we are live on Instagram. We are live on YouTube. My name is Dustin Jones, and you are listening to the PT on Ice Daily Show brought to you by the Institute of Clinical Excellence. Good morning, folks. Rolling in here. Today, we are talking about preventing sarcopenia. Preventing sarcopenia. It's going to be an awesome talk. It's going to be pertinent to almost all of the folks that you're working with, regardless of setting. Before we get into the goods, I want to give a few announcements, some big announcements coming up. First, in terms of the classes within the MMOA division, Modern Management of the Older Adult, we have our next Essential Foundations cohort kicking off April 27th. We have a jam-packed cohort right now, and if you missed out on that opportunity, April 27th will be your next chance. We have our Advanced Concepts class starting on May 4th. In terms of live courses, we're going to be in Indianapolis and Portland the first weekend of April, so April 2nd. Now, the big announcement, the one that we really want to bring your attention to, is that on April 7th at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, that is a Thursday evening, we are going to be doing the Ernie Memorial Workout. So if you've been following the MOA crowd for any bit of time, you probably heard us talk about Ernie Perrault. He passed away about a year ago, but an amazing individual, 99 years old, that really embodies so much of what we talk about here at ICE and then within the MOA division. Last year, the beginning of April, we did a memorial workout where it was about 30 or 40 folks hopped on a Zoom call and we did a body weight workout that's approachable for all levels, actually with Ernie's grandson. It was a pretty cool moment, and we're going to make that an annual thing. So we would love for you all to join. We're going to be dropping a Zoom link in the MMOA Digest email. We'll also be posting it to Instagram as well. But April 7th, Thursday, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Go and mark that in your calendar. We'd love for you all to join when we get to that point. So, all right, preventing sarcopenia. So this is a big topic, especially when you just zoom out and look at geriatrics in general, right? I think many of us in kind of the rehab space and the fitness space are somewhat familiar with sarcopenia. We hear this term. We know what it is to some extent. We probably have a good idea of what it may look like in terms of its clinical presentation, but we may not necessarily be targeting sarcopenia or even thinking about preventing it way before its onset. So we want to give you some helpful information to be thinking about for your own life, but then for your patients as well, of how can we kind of get ahead of the curve when we're talking about sarcopenia. So a lot of this information is coming from a recent review that is awesome. I'm going to be posting the link on the Instagram comments, but this is from Strategies to Prevent Sarcopenia in the Aging Process, Role of Protein Intake and Exercise. This is published at the end of 2021 in the journal titled Nutrients. Lays this out beautifully. I want to give you some of the highlights and some of the action steps I think we can all really benefit from when we're working with individuals. Just to kind of give you the scope of why this is a big deal, we need to think about the change of the age of our population, which you've heard us talk about this crap before in terms of all these crazy stats and the silver tsunami and all those types of things. But this stat that they shared right out the gate was very interesting to me. It just kind of hit home of how quickly these changes are happening. So from 2015 to 2025, all right, we're talking a decade, there will be a 38% increase in folks over 65 years old. From 2015 to 2025, there is going to be a 38% increase in folks over 65. Now, think of the implications of that, right? think of our current healthcare system, our current housing issues that we have, our infrastructure. Are we able to support folks that are of a higher age that may need a little bit more medical care or more assistance in particular areas? Are we capable of doing that? And any of you all right now are probably shaking your head no, right? I mean, you're already squeezed way too thin. We already don't have enough beds in hospitals as it is, thanks to this pandemic and staffing issues. And there's all kinds of issues that really are stacking the cards against our population getting older. So this is a big issue. Big issue. And one of the things that are threatening the independence of many of these folks is sarcopenia. So when we say sarcopenia, all you need to think about is relative loss of muscle mass and strength. All right. It's loss of muscle mass and strength. Those two are really important, right? Because you can still lose muscle mass and still be strong, right? And you can still be strong and not have a lot of muscle mass. It's both. It's when we're losing muscle mass and strength. And this is predictive of so many outcomes that we care about, that we want to prevent, right? Like the progression of frailty, where people are more vulnerable to situational stressors, or people are more likely to have a fall, or more likely to have some type of disability where they're requiring some type of assistance, ultimately reducing their overall physical capacity and independence. Big deal, right? Stuff we care about. So we want to get ahead of this curve. Now, what contributes to sarcopenia? And this is where the literature is highlighting a very, very consistent theme, and one that we can do something about. So what you're seeing in terms of the profile, a lot of the folks that are going to experience sarcopenia is that they're typically marked by a lot of inflammation, right? So in terms of some of their blood markers, these inflammatory blood markers, they're relatively high with these individuals. We know that those things are elevated by all kinds of different lifestyle factors, right? Nutrition is kind of the one that we always go to. Well, actually, physical inactivity and sedentary behaviors can increase inflammation, so movement can help there. Sleep patterns as well, sleep hygiene can influence those inflammatory markers. So that's one key variable. A lot of these folks are also, they demonstrate insulin resistance. So we're very familiar with many of the factors that can result in that. But the overarching theme with a lot of these folks is they're relatively physically inactive. They're not moving a lot, and they're not moving in a manner that's of a higher intensity. They're relatively physically inactive, and a lot of them will demonstrate sedentary behaviors where they are literally doing nothing, not moving for extended periods of time. The big thing that we want to think about is that sarcopenia, it's a big topic when we talk about like geriatrics and older adults, right? But you don't have to be, quote unquote, an older adult to experience sarcopenia. We're seeing folks in their 50s, 40s that are well on their way to having that sarcopenia diagnosis. So don't just think it is age. And as that theme continues to rise and become more and more clear, we're starting to see that sarcopenia you're not destined to it if you reach your 80s and 90s, that it is preventable, that you can do something about it. And this goes back to the question Christina posed. This is like 2 or 3 years ago, and I freaking love this. Is normal aging as we know it really just deconditioning? So many of the things that we assume are quote unquote normal with getting older, is that a part of the aging process, or is that more just deconditioning? If it's deconditioned, what does that mean? That means we can condition it, right? We can do something about it. And that's very empowering to me as a person, but then also hopefully for you all working with individuals. So when we're talking about sarcopenia, what our main goal is we need to really strike that balance between that muscle protein synthesis and muscle protein breakdown. That synthesis and breakdown. We need to strike that balance and do what we can, stack the cards in our favor to encourage more muscle protein synthesis. Now, the issue, especially when we're talking about older adults, is that as we age, by and large, we do experience a little more resistance to that muscle protein synthesis, right? We don't see as much of an anabolic response as we would if we were younger, for example. And so for a lot of these folks, it needs a little more of an intensive and deliberate intervention to encourage that muscle protein synthesis. So we need that, but then also think about the lifestyle, the nutritional behaviors of some of the folks that we work with. If they've ever tracked how much protein they're taking in, or if you've ever tracked that for him, it can be absolutely mind-blowing to see how little protein some of these folks are consuming. Some of it is just they're following recommendations from, maybe a primary care doc from 30 years ago, or who knows, some commercial or blog post or Dr. Phil episode, whatever. Or they just struggle to really be able to take down that much protein, whatever the form, which can be very common for folks in terms of their appetite. And then you put on top of that sedentary behaviors, physical inactivity, and it just creates this cocktail where muscle protein breakdown is typically happening a little bit more and quicker than muscle protein synthesis. And that's not a great situation, but we can do something about it. All right. So let's get to the good stuff, right? What can we do about it? So I'm going to lay out about 5 to 6 points that we want you all to consider that are based on this review and the review of the literature. The first one that we all need to grasp is that every single person listening or watching to this video is a geriatric clinician or fitness professional. Wherever you stand right now, you specialize in older adults, right? I know many of you all watching and listening right now think, oh, well, I'm just in my out of network cash based clinic where I'm just working with young CrossFit athletes under the age of 40, right? Some of you all are working with athletic teams, high school soccer team, football team, whatever. Those aren't older adults, right? You're right. They're not yet, but they're going to be. We're all old people in training. Every single one of us, most folks, right, are wanting to live long and die fast. So that 18-year-old you're working with, that 20-some-year-old, that 30-some-year-old, they probably have hopes, dreams, and aspirations to live a long life and die quickly and maintain their capabilities all the way till the end. So you're treating an older adult in training, many of you all, and everything that you're doing in some way, shape, or form is influencing that person. The words you say, the interventions you recommend, the habits you help them make are going to influence them right now, but then also in the future. Now think about that. You are working with the future 80-year-old, hopefully, right? If all goes well. You're influencing that person. What can we do now that's going to set them up for success down the road? Even the folks that are working with the high school athletes, even the PEDS clinicians, right? I did a whole episode on this. Every PT is a Jerry PT. This is about a year ago. Encourage you to listen to that if you're still pushing back on that comment there. So if you embrace that, then we think, okay, all right, I've got something to do to influence that 80-year-old person, that future 80-year-old individual. So here's what this article is recommending. First off is a daily intake of 1.6 to 1.8 grams per kilogram of body weight of protein. I'm going to say that again. They're recommending the daily intake of protein to be 1.6 to 1.8 grams per kilogram of body weight. Now, traditionally, the dietary recommendations, a very common number that we've heard that's been challenged extensively has been the 0.6 to 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight, which over the past 5 years or so, that's really starting to say, no, that's kind of like this minimum. We probably should be upwards to kind of that 1 to 1.2 grams per kilogram of body weight. But this review, especially when we're talking about older adults, they're recommending 1.6 to 1.8 grams per kilogram of body weight. That is a lot of protein. That's a lot of protein that many of you all aren't even hitting. That can be tough to hit. And think about some of the folks that we work with that have issues with their appetite and stomaching a lot of this stuff. That's a lot. That's a lot. But it can be very, very potent. And so what the research is showing, these folks need a little bit more protein to really promote that muscle protein synthesis. So that quantity, 1.6 to 1.8 grams per kilogram per body weight. What they also recommend is that trying to consistently have meals, at least 3 meals throughout the day that have at least 0.6 grams per kilogram of body weight. So this really speaks to the consistency of protein consumption throughout the day and not just a huge bolus right after your workout, right? How many of you all do that? Like, I got to get my protein shake within 30 minutes right after my workout. But this research has really shown that the folks that really see more of that muscle protein synthesis have elevated serum levels throughout the day. They're not taking in that huge bolus. So 0.6 grams per kilogram per body weight. And if you do the math right, if you're following that, you're going to get to that 1.8 grams per kilogram of body weight if you hit those 3 meals. Now, it can be tough for a lot of folks, especially if they're in some type of situation or institution where they're having prepared meals. That's very difficult to get if you've spent any time in acute care, skilled nursing facility, assisted living facilities. The meals can be somewhat rough, and that's probably putting it nicely. So typically supplementing is going to be very, very helpful in this situation. And for a lot of folks, it's going to be a little bit easier to digest and stomach, and they'll have the appetite to handle a very potent protein shake. And so if we are supplementing, so that review basically is saying if we can do this in high quality whole foods, natural foods, especially animal proteins, that's kind of the primary source. If we do need to supplement, whey protein is a very, very good option, a very good option. High quality and a great muscle protein synthesis response to that bolus of that shake. So whey protein, it is, in terms of the research, is shown to be more beneficial than the other types of protein. So if supplementing, whey, that's what we want to do. So that's the protein recommendations, right? And what's beautiful about the literature and this article in particular is that they make all these protein recommendations, but they make it very, very clear that protein intake is meant to support resistance training. That we're not just going to drink our chocolate cake protein shake and expect to build muscle, right? I mean, as much as we probably want to be able to do that, it ain't going to happen, right? That may encourage some muscle protein synthesis to prevent a little bit of atrophy, but protein intake is meant to support resistance training. So if we are not performing resistance training at a minimum of 2 times a week, a lot of that protein ingestion may be lost, right? We need to lift some relatively heavy things. We need to get people moving. And we talk about this a lot, right? On every Wednesday, MMOA, Old Knot Week, right? Resistance training is huge for these folks. But I think something that we are going to start to emphasize more and more and more is that nutritional component. Because what can often happen is we will take people through these relatively intense sessions, get them resistance training, but we haven't really given them the building blocks of protein to be able to build that muscle. We're emphasizing the movement part and the lifting part, but not necessarily the nutritional side as much as we should. So you're going to hear us talking a lot more about that, about protein, also creatine as well. This article didn't speak to creatine. However, very soon creatine is going to be right on par with protein in terms of the influence of muscle protein synthesis in the older adult population. Very well studied in younger individuals. It's now starting to get a lot of momentum in the older adult population. So protein intake supports resistance training. And then last but not least, and this is kind of where many of us are, is in terms of this goal, is even if we are just reducing sedentary behavior, that is a huge win. That's a trigger. If we just get people moving, that is a trigger to encourage muscle protein synthesis. So if we can reduce sedentary behavior, that's a win. That's for like the home health clinicians, acute care folks, sniffers, right? Some outpatient, but I think especially in the home health setting, that's a huge win. If we can just get people up, moving, breaking up their sedentary behavior, it seems relatively simple, but that can be very influential in terms of preventing further loss of muscle mass and strength. So I'm going to reiterate this again. Every one of y'all is a Jerry clinician or fitness professional. All right. Embrace it. Even if you're working with the young folks, the high school athletes, they're going to be older adults someday, hopefully. And you're influencing them now and that future 80-year-old. Think about that. Daily intake of protein, 1.6 to 1.8 grams per kilogram of body weight. That's a lot. Try and do it through the meals, right? 0.6 grams per kilogram body weight per meal, 3 meals a day. That's going to be tough, though. Probably going to supplement. Whey protein is going to be your best option in this department. But don't forget, all this talk about protein is just to support what is achieved through resistance training. Resistance training is still our primary goal, but we can support the benefits of that with this protein, talking about protein intake. And last but not least, reducing sedentary behavior is going to be a huge win here as well. So we want to think about that too. All right, let me know your thoughts. Any questions, concerns? Maybe what's your favorite protein shake flavor? I'd love to hear that. I'm usually a chocolate kind of guy, but I'd like to expand my horizons a little bit. If you have some recommendations, drop them in the comments on the Instagram video. But y'all have a lovely Wednesday. We'll talk to you soon. See ya.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to the PT on Ice Daily Show. If you enjoyed this content, head on over to iTunes and leave us a review. And be sure to check us out on Facebook and Instagram at the Institute of Clinical Excellence. If you're interested in getting plugged into more ICE content on a weekly basis while earning CEUs from home, check out our virtual ICE online mentorship program at ptonice.com. While you're there, sign up for our Hump Day Hustling newsletter for a free email every Wednesday morning with our top 5 research articles and social media posts that we think are worth reading. Head over to ptonice.com and scroll to the bottom of the page to sign up.